Hello, I'm Philip Stoden from My House to Yours. Welcome to EMS at Sea Level. Today we're having a focused conversation on what I've been calling the missing generation. I've been noticing more and more, particularly when I'm at trade shows and conferences, that we're seeing a lot of younger people coming into the industry. We're seeing far too many gray hairs, including when I look in the mirror. And we seem to have a missing generation in the gap. I've kind of got a sense of why I think that's happened. But I wanted to start with John and Audrey. Need no introductions. I'd like to ask whether you see that happening, and as people that have been in the industry for a long time, do you think there is a generation gap? And what does that age demographic look like to you as you look across the industry? John, from the point of view of the Global Electronics Association, what do you see as a demographic when you're talking to your members and looking at the industry?
Phil, thanks, and thanks for having me. It's a compelling question, and I've heard the question repeatedly across, especially EMS and OEM leadership. There is a noticeable talent gap, particularly among professionals in their 40s, even reaching in a little bit into the 50s. And yes, I think offshoring played a big role in that. During the 1990s and 2000s, manufacturing investment really shifted to Asia. And so there were fewer opportunities for mid-level engineers and managers in the West. You also saw, because of that, the loss of some apprenticeship programs and early career paths during that time. And I really think this created a gap in domestic leadership pipelines that we're seeing and feeling now.
Audrey, from your point of view, you've spent a lot of that last 25 years working in the EMS industry, some of that time with Jabil, some of that time with your own business, supporting people with talent. Have you seen that as well? And do you put that down to just the shift to Asia, or do you think there are a whole bunch of other contributing factors like education priorities and just the perception of the industry as maybe not being as attractive or sexy as we'd like to think it is?
Yeah, that question really strikes a chord. Having been in the industry, and I'm going to show my age, almost more than 3 decades. And so having seen some of those big transitions and actually been part of it, I myself moved to Asia and lived there with my family as the organizations shifted the talent agenda. And so I've seen it and felt it on a deeply personal level. And so I think that there was a shift in offshoring, right? And that was really down to cost and availability. And it's no secret that the EMS industry did not have a good reputation for investing in talent. And so I remember early on in my career having to sell the idea of investing in talent. And so reputationally, it wasn't an attractive space for young, up-and-coming, high-potential folks. And so that goes to the offshoring, the lack of investment, the perception. And then we had the COVID piece as well, that all played into it. And so I think, yes, we do have a talent gap, and those are the contributing factors, and they're big contributing factors that you can't turn around in 30 days.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when I look at it, it feels like it's a problem that we see in the United States. It's a problem we see across Western Europe, maybe less over Eastern Europe. What do you think the geographic mix is? Do you think it is just a problem in those regions, or do you think there are other areas? Audrey, you're operating in all those different regions. What do you see, first of all?
I see it as a problem across all regions, specifically because EMS has such skinny profit margins. So there isn't a lot of room for error in terms of making investments and development. And so we don't have the larger margins that OEMs have. So I see it broadly across all the geographies. We do a lot of work in Poland and in the Ukraine, and then in some of the Western European countries, and we see it there. We do work in Taiwan, we do it in China, and we do it in Singapore and India, and we see it there as well, particularly what I would say is with engineering talent.
Yeah. Okay, John, do you agree?
Let me jump on. Yeah, I agree with probably everything that Audrey just said, but just maybe add a little bit of nuance to it. I think, especially on the engineering side, outside of the OEMs, I used to be an engineering student, and when I was looking for a job, even though this was 1,000 years ago, you look for the brand companies, right? And this is one of the things that we're striving to do as the Global Electronics Association, is create better awareness of the entire ecosystem and the amazing jobs that, whether it's in PCB, harness, materials, equipment, EMS, semiconductors, OEMs, all of these have very challenging and rewarding opportunities, but most engineering students just aren't aware. And so we have a number of initiatives, and we can talk about it later. But I think that's part of it. Is people just if they chose engineering, there's another whole if there. A lot of people are choosing a lot easier majors that pay the same or more. And so if you have your brightest people saying, "Hey, I want to make some real money," and they're choosing a business degree that's 10 times easier to keep a 4.0 at, and you can graduate typically a year earlier, and now you've got better earning potential, that's a challenge too, getting the right people into our industry.
Yeah, and when you look at that shift in demographics across the industry, and you see this industry that has, a lot of people in their late 50s and 60s and 70s that are perhaps aging out, and not enough people in their 40s, when you're looking at things like succession planning, you're looking at things like knowledge transfer.
Yeah.
Are we at risk of that gap actually causing some real problems? Audrey, succession planning is something that you think about a lot when you're working with companies to align their business strategy and their talent strategy. Is that something that concerns them, that they don't have people in almost in the right age group or the right experience group?
Indeed. And I think one of the mindsets that we've seen with many organizations is they think it's a 1-for-1. So if I have this role and I have a succession candidate, then I'm good. But what we're seeing is actually you need optionality, and you can't have a single point of failure. And the reason for that is the world we live in today. We still have a war in the Ukraine. We have California fires. We have COVID re-emerging. We have burnout as a huge issue. And all of those factors mean that you can't rely on this 1-for-1 I-beam succession planning. When we're working with CEOs, we tell them you need to have at least 4 or 5 people in the ready now with the name on the envelope. You need to have at least 6 or 7 in the 2 to 3, 5-year range. And here's the thing that we've not been typically good at in EMS is this long-range planning. Who are the people that are 10 years out that are coming up through the ranks? I remember, working with Tim Main many years ago in Jabil, and I would roll up to him with a succession plan for 2 to 3 years. And he said, no, who are my 8, 9, 10-year people? And very proactive. And so I think that there's a mindset shift that needs to happen around this idea of succession because of the environmental factors.
Yeah, John, do you see it as a succession issue, or also this risk of losing critical institutional knowledge as it kind of transfers through the generations?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I mean, companies need to have an intentional bridge across the generations. We need to be investing in mentorship, cross-training, systems that help talent rise and stay. Because, people can choose lots of options now. We saw this, especially in COVID. People are like, hey, I could go do this over here. They need to be looking at things like digital upskilling so that even their older workers, they're able to bring those new skills. AI isn't just for young people. They need to have purpose-driven careers to attract the younger groups. So, because younger professionals, they want to make sure that the company they're going to be working with are making impact. They have a sustainability path and they have a growth path. Diversity and inclusion is, it expands your recruitment pools, in terms of hiring more women, underrepresented groups, et cetera. And then this whole workplace flexibility really went on steroids during COVID, and the younger generation expects it, in terms of remote or hybrid options. You're going to need to adjust some of your thinking in order to make sure you can get the best talent, and then take the existing talent, and you've got to have those mentorship plans and cross training and apprenticeship pieces across there. Otherwise, you will lose it. I mean, you talked about it. Is it just a West issue? In Japan, they're trying to bring back the semiconductor industry to Japan. And they've got people in their 60s and 70s that they're bringing back out of retirement to try to train people so they can fill in those gaps, because it just disappeared.
Yeah, there's a big there's a big knowledge gap, as we talked about those jobs migrating to Asia. There was a huge amount of knowledge in that period that migrated at the same time, and a lot of training that went on elsewhere. Do either of you see any regions that have been immune to this? When I look at some of the emerging countries that are very successful, like Estonia, for example, and some of the smaller countries that have managed to build up a really high representation in the industry, are they doing something different? Is their talent pool different?
So maybe let me jump in first on that, and Audrey, if you have other insights. But so at the Global Electronics Association, we have like IPC certification around the world. And we do see a lot of certification happening in like Eastern Europe to try to make up for that. But it's everywhere. And we're trying to, as we talk with companies, no matter where they are. I mean, I've traveled all the world visiting with the industry, and it's a common thread. No question. They need new people, especially when if at the operator level, that transition, you have turnover that is, 10 is a nice number. I'm hearing 30 and 40% in some countries where their annual turnover of operators. And then it's your best operators that you promote to technicians. And if they can't find the engineers, when they're coming out of school, they're not really trained to work in the EMS industry at all. And so you're starting fresh. They're just basically coming out with basic skills. And so you have to have a plan to build into that. And part of what we do at the Global Electronics Association through things like the Electronics Foundation that works with schools and provides, awareness as well as education and training. We have reached over 100,000 students across hundreds of schools, and we're just scratching the surface. That doesn't mean 100,000 are going into our industry, but at least now they know what it is. And then we have, obviously the training certifications, apprenticeship programs. And we can't forget about just retraining. Just like people from our industry are leaving to choose other industries, we could be stealing from other industries as well. I mean, we're implementing a lot of really cool technologies with automation and AI in the EMS industry. And so that's an opportunity. And those are great things to put on people's resumes when we're trying to attract from other industries. And frankly, the electronics industry segments of it go up and down, but impacts every other major industry in the world. So it's a pretty secure place to have a job.
Yeah, it's sustainable work. It's interesting work, and if you are driving your career in the right direction, it's pretty well rewarded as well. Yeah. When you think about maintaining stronger talent pipelines, Audrey, are there sectors or parts of the industry or even other industries that we can learn from or should learn from?
There are, right? But one of the things I was taught early on in my career in EMS is we like to do things lean and mean. And we like to do things fast and go further. And I'm not sure that we can learn a lot of that from the OEM space, but I think we can learn from each other. And, I think we can challenge ourselves. I've been researching this for many, many years now. And I was recently at a manufacturing conference, and the demographics ran across all of the generations. I would say that there was 5 generations in the room, and there was maybe 300 people. And we did a word cloud on electronically to say, what is the one word you think about when you think about manufacturing? And I'm just looking at the word cloud right now, and it was things like innovation, growth, building, creating, design, robotics, AI, automation, machine learning, engineering, development. So I would say that there's a real optimism. There's a real optimism in the industry, and that's across all generations. And so I think that the generation that have been in the industry more years, like all of us, they're optimistic, and they're really leaning in to say, what does this change need to look like? And then you've got those younger new entrants to the workplace that are pushing really hard. But I'm feeling a real optimism around the industry, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's more of a buzz around the industry, and I think that's partly because of AI and stuff. And when I look at some of these younger generation innovators I see, and there's some really exciting, well-funded startups in the industry that we probably haven't seen, or we weren't seeing 10 years ago, and we've started to see more and more. I think that are really exciting. Then there's a challenge in how do we bridge the gap between these digital natives and the kind of old school manufacturing guys that are just, operational firefighters. They're used to getting things done. I remember talking to one of the CEOs of one of these startups, and he'd spoken to an engineer that was working on the line. He was doing a software that would help improve the performance of the line. And this guy said, well, actually, I just listen to the line. If the line, I can tell by the sound of the way the placement machines are running, how things are going. And I thought, well, that's great, but that is so unsustainable. How are you going to train that? Yeah. How do you get those two generations to make that bridge between that tribal knowledge and that innovative, creative startup mentality? John, a lot of these companies are members of your associations. You must see them together in working committees. Do they mesh well?
Yeah, I think they do, but it's interesting. I have to comment on something Audrey said that it just struck me right now. So we talk about electronics manufacturing, and too often the word manufacturing has an old context to it. It's like, if you go to a bunch of parents now and said, do you want your kids to go into manufacturing? They're thinking dirty factories or it's this historical view. They don't understand the modern factories that we have today using the coolest stuff. So I'd almost love to just, throw away the word manufacturing, and whether it's we're an electronics creation or electronics innovation or just something like that, just to change the word up so people would think about it differently, I think may help, because there's a stigma about, that we had from, there's these old TV shows, and I'm going to date myself with I Love Lucy, right? Working in the factory with the bottles and stuff like that. And I feel like people think that is what manufacturing is, and it isn't anymore. It's 3D printing. It's, automation, robots, it's AI. Yeah. It's, the coolest stuff in the world going on right now. But on top of that, to your point, we need to put those groups together. You need to take the generationals. You take the 20 somethings with the 50 somethings or the 60 somethings and get them talking and say, wow, because they can both learn from each other. And that's the opportunity when you get those, that diverse group, and diversity isn't just about ethnicity or gender. It's about diversity of experience, diversity of region, diversity of, careers, whatever it may be. And the more diverse, I call it, creating potpourri. Potpourri smells great, but it's made up of a lot of different stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what we need. We need a lot of different things coming together. And you just get better solutions when you have a diverse group.
Yeah. Audrey, you must come across that quite a lot when you're workshopping strategy and workshopping talent with your clients. Is there a different dynamic in the room when you have all those different generations together?
Yes, and it's beautiful. It really is beautiful. And the past few years, we've actually been in a lot of conferences where we've had those different generations, and we talk about some of the strategies that works well when you're thinking about, John, I wrote down, you used, we really need a plan around talent. And yes, we do. And we call that strategic talent planning, which means what kind of talent do we need to buy and hire? What kind of talent do we need to build? What kind of talent do we need to bind? And really this retention. And, I think one thing that struck me when you were talking, John, was this idea of the different generations being in the room and this idea of reverse mentoring, right? And what can the generations who've been in the workplace longer learn from newer generations that are coming into the workplace? And I think the number one thing that drives that is curiosity. So how can we have a mindset of curiosity that sounds like, well, what if? And what might that look like? And what if we did this? And what if we did that? And to be honest, I'm seeing a lot of that in the industry.
Yeah, that's fascinating and and as you say, John, very encouraging. And what I really like about that is when I've hired people and worked with people, and we're basically doing the same task, they'll look at what I'm doing and they'll say, "Hey, why are you doing it that way, Phil? We've got all these tools now that we can do this much faster with." And they're making me more productive. They're making me more agile and more able to maybe deliver more in the same time. So there is a real there's almost like a mind meld going on there that's hugely valuable. We talked a little bit about re-attracting or attracting mid-career professionals from other industries, John. You mentioned that. When you look around, do you see anybody doing that successfully? And what are the what's the secret sauce? What is it about? Is it about the work environment? Is it about the perception of the industry and us needing to change that? You mentioned the word manufacturing. I think that maybe is problematic because EMS do so much more than manufacturing now. They really are a complete product partner. And the word factory, I think the word factory has a bit of an off perception as well, doesn't it?
It does a little bit. Yeah, I don't have anybody that I can point to and say, oh, these guys have mastered that. But I've seen it in bits and pieces. I saw one company which was, they reinvented the career day. They advertised locally, but they streamlined it. And this was really pulling from other industries. It's not pulling from our industry at all. And what they did is they brought them in. It was basically an all-day event. You signed up, you registered via the whatever advertisement they did, whether it was radio, newspaper, internet, etc., social media. And then you came in, they gave you a brief little introductory of their company. Then they gave you a factory tour where you got to meet people that were actually doing the jobs that you would be hiring for. They did interviews then after a lunch that they provided, and they literally wrote offers that day.
Wow.
And they would start on Monday. It was, and they saw really good success in pulling people from other, competitive things. And they're talking about the same types of things we're talking about, why this is a great career path, why this is a stable industry, why this has, longevity in front of it. And, all of the things, in terms of modern technology, and they get to see it. It's tangible to them. Putting an ad on LinkedIn isn't tangible.
No, you've got to have something you can see and touch. And I think there are some companies that have done that really well. I used to love some of the stuff Jabil did at the Blue Sky Center. They do robot block parties and all kinds of different things that would have people from other industries. And actually just doing events that brought the families of staff into the factories and showed them what was going on and showed them the opportunities was really clever. Audrey, when you look at that idea of attracting people from other industries, are there tools that you specifically have seen that you like or that you like to encourage people to use?
Yeah, and here's where it starts. You can't just put a brand on paper and put it out there. It has to be authentic. Also, the generation coming into the workplace can smell a rut really quickly. And so they're looking for authenticity. And, you know, I'm going to really leverage what John was talking about. And one of the things that's important for the newer generation is this idea of community. So we have one client that has 5,000 employees. They're running a couple of $1 billion through their factory. And a couple of the ways they're doing it is they are doing a lot of community events. They're giving back to the community, they're involving the community, and they're engaging with the community. So that's one thing. The other thing that's harder to replicate is high quality leadership. What I mean by that is we don't go and work for companies, we go and work for leaders. The same way we leave leaders, we don't leave companies. And so how do you create a reputation in the community, whatever community it is that you serve, whether it's local or national or global, for high quality leadership capacity? And then third thing is development. The newer generation in the workplace, they're not looking to come in and stay where they're at. They're looking to develop. So how can you attract them and retain them through these development opportunities? And, you know, I was at a manufacturing conference quite recently, and there was some educators in the room. And I talked about this idea of burnout is real for this generation. On the 5 factors of burnout, the lower 3, 57% of the newer generation to the workplace are they're noting that there's a level of depression, which is really fascinating to me. And then if we make a leap and we say one of the key questions that Gallup asks in their engagement survey is, do you have a friend at work? And the reason they ask that is because they know that engagement quadruples when you have connection at work. And, you know, one of the fascinating things that the educators shared with me is they did a similar survey in the school system and asked the kids, do you have a friend at work? And 50% reported not having a friend at school.
Yeah,
and to me, not good. That is shocking. And as leaders, we need to have that as our context for people coming into our organizations. So the things we need to do are not easy to fix, but the rewards are high.
And a lot of those things I think are cultural.
Yes.
You know, so if part of the thing that they're looking for, this younger or newer generation, is this hybrid or remote work, but that actually diminishes the chances of finding a friend at work. And so in spite of that, you need to find ways, you know, companies need to sit there and say, hey, we're going to have these days where we get together so you can still have that remote or hybrid workplace, but still have the interaction so you can form those friendships. And that really falls on the responsibility of managers and management. They have to sit there and say, we're going to budget for my team to get together for, 3 or 4 days, not just doing that, doing work as well, but in the same location, because that's worth doing, or working on a project or overcoming a problem. Overcoming a problem together, I mean, that is what builds camaraderie, team, and friendship. And when you have that, I couldn't agree more with you, Audrey, on that information. People stay for people, whether it's a leader, a friend, or whatever. And if you are not fostering that, people are looking.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Satya, the CEO at Microsoft, who has a strong brand around his empathetic leadership, he insists that it's up to leaders and managers to establish a reason for people coming together. Because
Yeah.
Well, if I'm Audrey and I'm going in to sit at my cube because I'm being forced to come in,
that's a problem.
What's the point? So it's up to managers and leaders to figure out, what are ways that we can drive innovation? What are ways that we can drive creativity? What are ways that we can drive connectivity? And that's the job of a leader.
Yeah, I see some leaders that are really grasping that, and I can think of a few, and you probably know the same people as me, and you would agree with me if I mentioned their names. But people that kind of have a sense of fun to their business, have a real strong sense of family, have that in their mindset that they're constantly going to have those cultural moments where they share with the company what their plans are, and they talk about things, and everybody is on board with with what's going on in the business, and they feel like they're all participants rather than just staff. That's a huge part of it. I wanted to highlight something that Audrey does, which I am a huge fan of, and I keep talking about it, and that's the idea of this stay interview, because I think one of the big issues with this generation gap is actually stopping people leaving. And you mentioned COVID, which was a catalyst for a lot of people leaving. Audrey, just tell us a little bit about the idea of the stay interview and what that's all about.
Yeah, and just 1 minute on some history. I was really always taught early on in my EMS days around metrics. Metrics are key and measurement's key, but you have to break that down into leading metrics and lagging metrics. And so the lagging metric is turnover. It's too late by then. It's too late. So one of the things we have to do is to say, well, what would be the leading indicator to that? And one of the ways that we really encourage our clients to think about is conducting stay interviews. Now, you can't do it with every single person in your organization, but you can arm your leaders with this capability. And it's very simple. And we just say, get a pen out or get your phone out and write this down or put it in your phone. And here's the question. The question is, John, what would have to be true for you to feel inspired, motivated, and valued? And what can we do around that? And how can we work with you? And just zip it and listen. You don't need to go into any other detail. Just listen. And it's almost like you're going on a listening tour, but the question is very specific, because here's the challenge with this new generation. They want everything customized. I used to talk about my daughter, Hannah. I go and buy sneakers. I order them online, or I go into the Nike store and I buy them off the shelf. When she buys sneakers, she wants to know, can I have the laces customized a different color? Can I have the sole customized? Can I have them delivered within 12 hours? And will they connect to my devices? And so this idea of highly customized mindsets is what's in the workforce now. And so if we can't crack the code on that, then I think we're losing out.
And it can be as simple as asking the question. I don't know how you felt, John, but when Audrey says, John, what would it take? You automatically feel valued, don't you? You automatically feel valued within the organization and heard, and that's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Last question for both of you. If you were to give one piece of advice to a company struggling with that talent gap and struggling with their talent pipeline, what would it be? What would be the one thing they should do? John, perhaps you'd like to go first.
One thing. Oh, there's so much.
I know. There are so many things. One big thing.
We've spent the last, all of my 13 years here at the Global Electronics Association working on workforce. And so there's so many things, from certifications, apprenticeships, et cetera. I guess it would just be, don't feel like you have to do it all yourselves, but you have to budget time and resources to your workforce. A gentleman I think we all know, I'll just use his name. What the heck? Paul Baldessari
yes.
at Flex. Paul came up to me one time and he said this. He said, John, we can all buy the same parts. We can all buy the same equipment. the differentiator in a company is people. And, it occurred to me, in the EMS industry, we'll spend millions of dollars on machines, and we'll go through great efforts to make sure we get the right machine. Is it going to last? And we maintain it? And are we doing everything to make sure that that valuable asset continues to work for us? We need to have that same mentality about people in the workforce. That what are we doing to curate this asset that we've purchased and and grown and continue to invest in? So it needs to be focused. We just need to treat it the same as we do as on a capital investment. It is
value it.
Future.
Yeah. Well said. Audrey, last word for you.
Yeah. And I love this idea, John, around this mindset shift around the value of people. And so the one thing that I would say is the organizations that we've worked with that have been most successful is that they have made time, made a plan, and distributed the accountability. What I mean by that is the CEO will get his team together, they will build out the talent plan, they will assign ownership, and then they're held accountable. And I learned this years ago, if you don't hold people accountable, there's not a hope in heck of it happening. So, what's the downside of not doing it? And, in some organizations we work with and organizations I've worked with before, you get fired if you don't focus on it. And that's just the way it needs to be. This is part of your job.
I'm chuckling. I'm sorry. I'm chuckling because there's a cartoon I've used in some of my workforce presentations where there's the CFO saying, how can we invest all this money in these people? What if they leave? And then the CEO comes in and he basically says, what if we don't and they stay?
Yeah. Even worse.
Yes.
Wise words from you both. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the work both of you and both of your companies and organizations are doing in the talent area. And I do think it's shifting mindsets, particularly like it when you're both working together. I loved what you were doing at the EMS Leadership Summit in Anaheim this year. And when I was on the event floor afterwards talking to leadership, it was something that they felt strongly about. It was one of the big three topics at Apex last year, and I expect it to be the same going forward. Thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for talking to me and joining me, and look forward to chatting again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.